Hey guys, welcome back. BDC Kara here. We're back with our weekly Q&A content. It's a video if you're on YouTube, which most of you are. It's a podcast if you either aren't watching it, I guess it's a podcast kind of anyways, or it's primarily audio for you at least. But it also is actually available on a bunch of different podcasting platforms if you check out the links in the description on YouTube.
Right.
So this is the season of the Lost Challenges. I like listening to stuff in podcast form when I have the option generally. But you also put more than a little bit of work into making sure that there's something worth watching for anybody who's watching. And it's sort of paired with our sort of discussion at the start of it of what we're going to be seeing.
Right.
So why don't you tell the people, the lovely people at home, what they'll be looking at if they're on the YouTube.
It sounds like you're doing like a game show.
Yeah.
The people at home. You know how they do that?
We're all at home though. I'm at home right now.
That's true.
Actually, we're the people at home, and I don't know where you're listening. A lot of you are probably at home, but you might be in any number of places. I'm the only... I know where we are right now, though, for sure.
Right. So, Mortal Kombat Scorpion X. His passive is Reborn Spectre, and that means reaching 200% damage on a special attack makes it damage over time damage automatically crit. Bonus 8% health per promotion. He's got 1200 attack, 1000 health. And so what's interesting, okay, so this is our 11th season of this. And up until now, we sort of arbitrarily decided when there was a break in the season.
Yeah.
When new one started, when an old one ended.
For the first while, it was because we did one every week, and so then every time we skipped a week, then we would do a new season.
Right. But this season was the first one, I think, to really have a proper theme. And that was the Lost Challenge characters. So for the longest time, since May 2020, there's been a repeating cycle of challenge characters of 43 characters, and a bunch of them, I think 20-something of them, 24 of them, are missing. And so this season we have, I mean, what is this, episode 15? We have been doing, we've gotten around to finally doing all the Lost Challenge characters each week to demonstrate them in play, talk a little bit about their strengths and weaknesses, whether we like them or not. And it feels like we've done it just in time. We've gotten through, I guess, how many of them? 17 done. We've got 7 more to go. 7, that many?
Or maybe 6 more to go?
Something like that.
Because I think it's 23 challenge characters that are missing.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to have to figure out what we did.
Yeah.
Because we doubled up on some weeks, I think.
Yeah.
So, and we're not so good at counting, the counting thing.
Yeah.
But before I even get into Mortal Kombat X Scorpion, it's that we had something happen that we talked about in weekly recap.
Yeah, the Gaslight Batman pack is in the store, which is not usual and hasn't shown up in the past as part of the pattern. So it's what it normally is it's a cue to what we're going to be seeing next week. Right. And this is the first time where it hasn't sort of made any sense or fit with what the pattern has been for a long time. Right.
So the first time in almost 4 years that it hasn't done that. So to me, that's actually a sign that somebody is making adjustments to the game. And that there's a chance that we will have a change in the challenge cycle.
It's possible. That or something weird has happened and it's going to be nothing and then we'll be disappointed.
I still think it's the most likely thing, and I feel like it's... the most rational explanation is it's just a coincidence, right? We've had 10 previous seasons. Nothing significant's happened during those seasons. And this, when we finally decided to do the Lost Challenge characters, more than halfway through it, we get some indication something's happening. So I like to pretend that we have some influence, that maybe somebody at Warner Brothers is listening to us.
Oh, yeah.
And paying attention.
And it just took 17 weeks.
Yes, they took 17 weeks, or they realized that they were going to do something. So
it's because they watched this one and not the shorter one where we actually talk directly about Injustice.
Yeah. So it looks like maybe, I'm trying to think, because I don't think we've done any of them. So there's still Anti-Matter Sinestro, Boss Solomon Grundy. Injustice 2 Superman we've already done. Even before season 11, because we've been using it. That gave me the idea back in September of last year. Yeah. This would be worthwhile doing. So we've got Elseworld Flash, Wonder Woman 600, Zatanna, and you don't really need to call her Prime because she's the only Zatanna. And Zod Prime, because there's a Man of Steel Prime.
Yeah.
Or sorry, Man of Steel Zod. Man of Steel Prime. Oh my God. This is a long day. All right, so looking at Scorpion. So there's 3 Scorpion skins. This is the third one. We've looked at the other 2. This is better than Mortal Kombat Scorpion in terms of stats, right? So it's 1,200 and 1,000 instead of 950 and 850.
Yeah.
But not as good as Mortal Kombat Scorpion, who's 1,400 and 1,200.
And he does get the advantage of the extra health per promotion, where that does sort of increase his stats by the time he's at max promotion.
Right. So if we're looking at 8%, if we're at Elite 10, that's another 80%. Ooh, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, on the balance, his stats might actually, even at Elite 7, he probably stacks up reasonably well, where his attack stat is about the same as Mortal Kombat Scorpion's health stat, and his Mortal Kombat MKX Scorpion's health stat is effectively
higher.
More.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's higher in a way that doesn't show up on matchmaking, right? Because we determined that passives that boost health or damage don't count.
Right.
So he's got higher stats, but hidden higher stats, which is actually pretty good.
Yeah. So it's good because it doesn't affect matchmaking. It's bad because it means that any health boosting gears will have a lesser effect on him.
That's true. And the other reason that it's bad, it's good if you're playing as him offensively, and it's bad if you're playing as him defensively, because defensively in general, you want to max out your stats that you're putting in to attract more fights.
Right. So what do we like about it? All right, his special 2 damage is interesting. So it's reduced by half because of the damage over time effect, which is bad. But if we're talking damage over time, his tap combo ender has damage over time as fire. His swipe combo is only 2 hits, and the damage with 2 hits is 4% and 4%, so that's only 8%. But there's other characters where they set a precedent where they might have only 2 hits on the swipe combo, but the amount of damage is boosted because of the reduced number of hits. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, Shazam Prime does more damage per hit because he only does 2 hits.
Yeah.
So that kind of sucks. So the tap combo ender does the same amount of damage plus damage over time. So the only issue is, you don't always get the tap combo the combo ender on the tap. Mm-hmm. So because if you get it, that's a really good argument to say that it's almost never worth doing the swipe combo.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is unusual.
Right. Quake Engine is great on him as the 3rd gear because it makes up for some of the special damage that you lose for his damage over time with that 50% boost if opponent has less than a bar of power. Plus, it increases the amount of damage over time that he will give. So, as a 3rd gear, it's really good, which is why in this loadout you're seeing him. A lot of times we like to use Claw of Horse. We're not using Claw of Horse on him. This time we've given it to Raven, even though it's not as effective as it is on your Master's Death Cart person to be able to strip all the gears. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it's worth it for how much extra damage he does on the 2 other characters who don't have Astro Harness on the team. Yeah. Or at least 2 characters on the team who don't have Astro Harness.
That's true.
So, other thoughts. Oh, special 2. It's got pretty great range. It's funny because the animation is a bunch of punches. And for how you look, how it looks, in my mind, if you're looking at like the consistency of it, right?
Yeah, because normally, you shoot a beam, you send something out, and it's got good range. Throw batarangs, whatever. Right. Right. But with a lot of the ones where you're doing something melee, right, where you're punching or kicking, it really hits exactly where it looks like it's going to hit in terms of where your character is moving. So you get pretty bad range usually. So
what's funny? All right. So which was the Raven? It was Regime Raven we were playing with recently.
Yeah.
And the other Raven skins at the beginning of their special 2. Nicely ranged. Pretty big. And she does the same animation, not ranged at all. Yeah. It's not like there's any real consistency, but I love that it is that ranged because it makes it super effective. It means that anytime you can drop in with 2 bars, you can immediately do special 2 and it's going to land. Yeah. So it solves a problem that we have sometimes when it's not ranged and we have to wait for the Master's Death Cart, the little bits of hits to come in to finish. And to have to wait leaves us a little bit vulnerable if the opponent has a bar of power or a bar or more power to specials. Special 2 is pretty good in that any of the hits can knock out the opponent, but it seems like the last hit of his special 2 does more than half the damage of the entire special, and it's already low damage special as it is. So effectively, you're not going to be knocking out the opponents with any leftover hits for the opponent tagging in.
Mm-hmm.
So practically it's about this. You end up with the same kind of problem that you have with other characters, the higher powered characters that can only knock out the opponent on the last hit of the special 2.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter entirely though. So here's the weird thing, right? All right, so let's get that out of the way. You got the same problem where you're vulnerable to tagging effects, and you're going to lose out on his special 2 damage over time. Actually, that was sort of the main point. Because, all right, so you do not a lot of hits. You have the most damage right at the end. So you have the best chance on the last hit of knocking out the opponent.
Yeah.
But it's the last hit that triggers the special 2 damage over time, which is bleed, which is nice, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're knocked out on the last hit, there's no damage over time triggered by it.
Yeah, because the next opponent just comes in fresh.
Right. So it's a little bit disappointing. What's nice, though, is that because we're using Quake Engine and we're doing a tap combo as soon as we tag in, we're getting a combo ender more than half the time.
Yeah.
So we can at least transfer that damage over time to the next opponent if we happen to knock them out. And if we don't, even better.
Yeah.
Because they're going to bleed out super fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to point out, now that we're forcing ourselves to play with some of the skins that we decided a long time ago on our first evaluation that they weren't worth the trouble, the Scorpions actually have decent speed. They're better speed than I remember, or I guess it's not or, I wonder if maybe they've buffed all of them for speed to make up for the fact that these are not Solomon Grundy, that these are not like slow as molasses.
They're not frustrating.
Yeah, and Scorpion should not be slow. It totally makes sense that a zombie, an oversized zombie, should be slow. It doesn't make sense that a martial artist should be slow.
It's true.
Yeah.
So moving on to our first question this week. It comes from Captain Hayes 1374, and they say, thanks for another great recap. An interesting note about Mortal Kombat Scorpion is that he is the only Scorpion card that does not have burning damage over time on his special 1, so its damage is not halved. Also, I'm cautiously optimistic that the challenge cycle is going to expand next week, starting with Gaslight Batman, but given the state of the game and how long the cycle has gone on, I'm not holding my breath. And so there were a bunch of not a bunch, but there's a handful of people talking about Gaslight Batman.
That's a bunch. All right, so we were watching Survivor. All right, so the latest season of Survivor, there's a guy that the clue on the setup for this challenge was it's going to take you several hours to do.
Yeah.
And the ridiculous thing is that in the middle of it, because they had, I think, 4 hours to do it or something. Yeah. In the middle of it, he says, well, it's going to take several hours. You don't have several hours. Forget it. And he stops it in huff because he's tired. And he throws the, what do you call the timer, the sand timer? The one that drips from
Hourglass?
Hourglass. And he throws it and breaks it on the beach.
Yeah.
Besides being ridiculous, because, people are walking on that beach, right?
Now
you
don't have several hours.
Because he said several means 7.
Oh.
So we don't have several hours because he said several means 7. That's in the word. That's what several means. So I thought that was kind of hilarious.
So you're talking about just being overly sort of prescriptive about language. It's like if you say a couple has to mean 2 and a few has to mean 3 or more.
Well, I don't know that a couple has to mean 2, but it's fair to say a couple is around 2.
Yeah.
Like a lot more than that couple is probably the wrong word for it.
Yeah, well, because, couples. Like,
right, 2.
Usually groups of 2 people, unless you're polyamorous.
But
and then you usually use different words. I don't know if you still count as a couple if you're in a polyamorous relationship and there are 3 people involved or more.
A triple?
Yeah,
no,
but a triplet is something else.
A triple is after a double. Okay, so yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So it's funny because
it's a throuple if you're not a couple.
Oh, I guess so. So when you say handful, I thought handful was fine. Handful works. Several does not for 7.
Yeah. Oh, I saw something interesting recently, and I didn't even really source this myself. It was like a secondary sort of thing by the time I heard it. So if normally you want to source information yourself, right now you should almost just assume that it's wrong until you look it up yourself instead of going, oh, maybe this guy, right? Because I'm not even, primary on it anymore. And I don't think it was even a particularly trusted source, but I saw something that was really interesting that talked about linear versus logarithmic representation of stuff, right?
Yes.
So for people who don't, linear, the distance between 1 and 10 on like a graph is the same as the distance between 10 and 20 and 20 and 30. Whereas in a logarithmic scale, as the numbers get higher, they get squashed together more. So 1 to 10
Yeah.
might take up, like 3 units of space on the graph.
Right.
And then 10 to 1,000 might take up 3 units of space on the graph.
10 to 100?
10 to 100, yeah.
I think it's each order of magnitude.
Each order of magnitude, yeah.
Is
Okay.
the same amount of room, right?
That makes sense, yeah. I didn't remember the exact, but
Yeah.
something that I learned that was interesting.
Oh, so I should probably explain. Order of magnitude is just
Times 10.
It's the next
Digit.
exponent.
Yeah.
So 10 to the power of 1, 10 to the power of 2, 10 to the power of 3. That's 10, 100, and 1,000. Oh, and 10 to the power of 0 originally is the 1. That's why you start off at 1.
Yeah, so every time it gets 10 times bigger. And so one of the things that was interesting is that apparently kids, by default, don't always think linearly. They think often logarithmically.
Mm.
So if you have kids who haven't had a strong sort of math education yet,
Yeah.
and you say like, oh, like 1 thing, 3 things, 5 things, if you put groups of them in front of them and you give them like a number line that's meant to represent between 1 and 10, they'll put like 3 at the halfway point. And they'll naturally think logarithmically.
Interesting.
I just thought that was really interesting because, one of those things is, in retrospect, right? When you see a phenomenon and you're trying to explain it afterwards, you can explain things a lot of ways in a lot of wrong ways. But to me, it makes some amount of intuitive sense because if you think about sort of in the real world when you're dealing with relatively small numbers, sort of ignore math, right? When you think about just sort of our base, like, toolkit as humans, right?
Right.
If there's 1 of something, or if there's 2 of something, or there's 3 of something, those are all pretty big differences.
Right.
By the time you get to, like 15, 20 versus 30, right? That number doesn't matter as much. If there's 1 bear, right?
Right.
That's a lot more bears than 0 bears.
Right.
That's a huge amount more bears than 0 bears.
Right.
And if there's 2 or 3 bears, that's also a massive problem, right? Each new one. But the difference between 8 bears around you and 10 bears around you is pretty negligible.
Right.
Because, and just thinking about, like, I need to count 1, 2, a couple of things, and then the bigger you get, sort of, the less precise each individual number needs to be. So it's kind of interesting to me to think about the ways that so much of what we take for granted and what feels sort of fundamental to us, because, I think very linearly, right? If you have a number line between 1 and 10, I'm trying to make all the ticks even, right? I'm probably subdividing in half over and over again.
Because you've been taught that, though.
Because I've been taught that. But to me, it didn't feel like it was, I thought about it that way because I've been taught that. It feels like I thought about it that way because that's the way that numbers are. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But it's interesting to recognize what we take for granted as the way the world works just because we're taught that. And I think, everybody finds that in different stuff. You learn more about sort of other like races and cultures. You learn about gender identities, like all these sort of things that you might not know by default. And it turns out that stuff that you take for granted is super limiting or wrong or whatever.
Well, it's not shared by everybody.
It's not shared by everybody. Yeah. And it's just interesting because one of the domains that I would have thought at least a little bit more that would be a shared sort of thing and shared understanding would be sort of numbers. And I know that people have different numbering systems, different like bases, base 10 isn't the one shared by everybody, but
base 16.
But thinking about numbers linearly felt so fundamental and foundational that it was interesting to learn that it's kind of constructed too.
So it's funny you should say that because I can give you an example of nature where logarithmic, where our bodies naturally, what is it? Process stuff logarithmically. Sound.
That's true.
So decibels, 100 decibels sounds twice as loud as 10 decibels.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah, that's right. And so it's a logarithmic scale that our body interprets.
Yeah.
For the amount of, I guess, what's decibels? It's the loudness, but that's a reflection of the energy, right?
Or no, I think decibels are actually adjusted so that they are a log scale.
Is it?
I think it is.
But you're adjusting it as log scale, but then the way we hear it is something that's twice as loud
I think something that's twice as loud is always 10 decibels louder. So it's non-linear. So if 20 decibels is twice as loud as 10 decibels and 30 decibels is twice as loud as 20 decibels. I thought it was in that sense.
Yeah.
So I think you flipped them.
So I've messed it up.
That's my understanding of it anyways. Maybe we're both wrong. This is what I say when I say check us.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting. So that's something I got to look up. So this is we use questions as a starting point, but I think some of our discussion is starting point. So the other thing is when we're learning stuff in school And I don't know what comes first, that we have a sense of the solar system or the or that kind of basic math. But I'll tell you, every representation we have of the solar system, all the planets are bigger than they are relative to the space. I think we do that a lot to be able to hold the idea of stuff in our heads, to give us a sense of what it is, even if it isn't a great representation of what the actuality is. All right, so tell me about decibels.
Every 10 decibels more is 10 times more powerful.
That's it.
So 0 decibels is specifically set to the quietest thing that we can technically still hear.
Right.
So it's basically silence. 10 times more powerful than that is 10 decibels. 100 times more powerful than that is 20 decibels. 1,000 times more powerful than that is 30 decibels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so I totally messed it up. But the idea is the same, and that it's something that is we experience every day that's non-linear.
Mm-hmm.
So, interesting.
Yeah. And 50 decibels are apparently is pleasant, and then 100 decibels is discomfort, 120 decibels is pain.
Right. So it escalates pretty quickly.
Yeah. But because it's, you know, the difference between 100 decibels for being uncomfortable and 110 and 120. 120 is 100 times louder than 100 decibels.
Right.
So the numbering scheme is sort of mapped more perceptually than it is linearly, in a similar way that like Fahrenheit is like 0 is really cold, 100 is really hot. Like it's kind of like human anchored. Whereas for water or for metric, 0 degrees Celsius is water freezing, 100 degrees is water boiling. So it's anchored on like a physical phenomenon, whereas Fahrenheit is more tuned to perceptual phenomenon.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's where Fahrenheit comes from. I know that's how people talk about it, right? I don't know if that has anything to do with like its actual like constructed origins, but
that it does work better that way. Like if you think about it like that.
Yeah. It's like I'm 0% hot, I'm very cold. I'm like 100% hot. Anything over 100, I'm very warm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so, anyways, the original point, the original thing that we were talking about was Captain Hayes talking about Gaslight Batman. So I say the game, how long the cycle is going on.
I guess we can say it again. I'm optimistic. I feel like that the regular rotation of both packs and challenges and the multiplayer rewards have been on a sort of an autopilot kind of cycle.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're changing the store, or one of the packs
is a good sign.
I think it's significant. It clearly shows some intervention. And if there's going to be that kind of intervention, all the stuff is coded already, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the kind of intervention, the thought that went into adding that pack into the rotation is as much thought that would be required to make the next challenge Gaslight Batman.
Yeah.
And to add everybody back in. I mean, it's 20-something characters. I mean, for the amount of time, for the time that we spend doing videos about this, if we had access to the code and I had, I guess, a few years of education in software engineering, I could probably fix it for them.
Yeah.
But
that's true.
So I feel like I'm actually very optimistic that we're going to see a change. And that leads us to the next question, actually.
Yeah, so this one comes from I Love Risa Sensei, and they say, so, do you think the cycle is changing?
Oh, I Love Her is a sensei.
I Love Risa Sensei.
Remember, we were saying...
We talked about it, yeah.
Yeah, I Love Her is a sensei.
Yeah.
I Love Her.
They say, so do you think the cycle is changing? Great idea about letting us know about characters required for weekly challenge. I don't know how you guys get it, but grateful. And it would be great if you could let us know about Gaslight Batman challenge character requirement.
All right, so our notes, I think, are not as detailed as far back, but the wiki is a great resource. It says that Gaslight Batman's required characters are Batgirl, Joker, and Raven. Yeah,
so we got our information from our notes.
Yes, generally we do, yeah.
The information is also available in the wiki.
Yeah. So what's interesting, though, is because we started last week saying what the next week's challenge character requirements are, which if Gaslight Batman comes back,
we might be wrong
window
after the first time we've ever done it.
Right. After Gaslight Batman comes, we don't know what's going to happen because we have no idea if things change.
Yeah, they kind of got us a little bit. You did the work organizing it.
But so what was interesting is, since I was doing the work anyways, so we've got 23 characters.
So we're talking
24
about...
characters? 23. 24.
24 characters, yeah.
23, I can't remember now. Of the missing
23 ones. That are missing, I think, yeah.
So there's a funny thing about is it 44? that
something,
are in.
however many that are in the cycle.
They are generally requiring, if you want the lowest availability of a character, they're generally bronze and silvers.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all of them, with 23 exceptions. There are 23 characters required in the challenges that are gold.
Yeah.
13 are store available.
If you're looking at the lowest tier, you can get them.
Right. And 10 are challenge golds. And if you take another breakdown of it, right? So there's, you may need less of them if you're not going past the first stage of Suicide Squad challenges, because all of those in the normal difficulty, the regular difficulty, you don't need any, there's no characters required at all. So out of the store golds that are required, out of those 13 times that there are store golds, there's only 4 characters. There's Batman, Superman, Lobo, and Zod.
Yeah.
So Batman you need 5 times, or 4 if you exclude Suicide Squad. Superman you need 5 times, or 4 if you exclude Suicide Squad. And then you need Lobo twice, and you need Zod once.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess part of how that's useful, is if you happen to get them, they're worthwhile keeping at least one copy, even if you don't like the characters.
Well, you can't sell your only copy of them anyway, so it doesn't matter.
I guess that's true too. Yeah, absolutely.
It's still nice to have gotten them, even if you don't actually like playing as them, because you will eventually need them. So
the other characters, though, the other 10 occurrences of challenge golds are 6 different characters only. Yeah. So there's Raven once, but you don't need her because it's Suicide Squad.
Yeah, so on the normal difficulty, there are no requirements, just in case anybody needs a refresher.
It's Batgirl once, but only if you want to get above the regular difficulty level in Suicide Squad challenge. Mm-hmm. And then the other characters are Killer Frost happens the most, which is 3 times. Hawkgirl and Aquaman are next most, twice each on challenge characters. Yeah. And then Scorpion. Once. And that's for Teen Titans Raven.
So that is an interesting list, right? The characters that you need to complete the challenge that are gold or higher are Batman, Superman, Lobo, and Zod. And the ones that you need from challenges are Hawkgirl, Killer Frost, and Scorpion. And I'm ignoring... and Aquaman. And I'm ignoring the ones that you need for Suicide Squad. And so theoretically, those are the lists of gold and challenge characters that you need to get all the other gold and challenge characters. To get all the other challenge characters.
Right. Yeah. And everybody else, I'm figuring that bronze and silver, it's not worthwhile making a distinction because they're reasonably cheap. And it's not too big a burden to spend it on buying a copy directly from the store. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, unfortunately, there's a comment that I've been wanting to get to for a while now from Burke's Homemade Memes, but we did not have time this week. Just because it's going to take long enough. I think that this is as good a place as any to end it off. So I will get to you, Burke. I have not forgotten about you, and I have looked at it every week in our list, and we haven't quite gotten to it. There's always been something that we want to answer right away, and then we ramble too much. And we'll also talk about us rambling next week as well. That's a promise. I'm making a commitment now so that we have to do it. Because I want to talk about both of those comments.
So, fingers crossed. If there's going to be a week, you join us for the weekly recap. I mean, usually I think because we get many more views on the weekly recap than we do on these Q&As, I feel like the Q&As are, the audience is a smaller subset of that. But if you happen to be the opposite, where you come for the Q&As, but you don't care about the weekly recaps, this will be the week to go to the weekly recap to see
if something's new.
Right.
Or also open the game for yourself.
I guess so, yeah.
But, there might be some good discussion in the comments, a little more than usual, I imagine. Yeah. So we'll see. Anyways, so I'd like to give a huge thank you to all of our lovely patrons on Patreon. That is Michael Devries, Irvin Ruiz, Hoshi127, and Nora Klimek on the credited level, as well as 5x5 supporting us on the gratitude tier. And we're not doing it this week because I just did it, but I had talked before about how I like to mix it up. Yeah. Who's saying it this week? I stole it from you again this week.
That's fine.
But it gave me an idea on a future week. We should go back and forth saying names, and we should layer them in like that. Well, like my
Call
Devries
Irvin
Ruiz
Hoshi
1 2 7
Nora
Klimek
who
are
supporting
us
on
the
credited level
and
5
by
5
who
is
supporting
us
on
the
gratitude
tier.
Okay.
Almost got it.
Very goofy. Okay, so
right.
there we go. Extra. There's no reason why we can't do bits and mix it up a little bit.
Sure.
I have more fun that way.
Yeah.
And
listen, we've been doing this for 10 years, right?
Listen, if all these people are getting out of it is us making the content and then maybe a little bit of joy when they hear us read their names, I'd be happy to try to inject a little bit more silliness into it.
Very good.
Anyways, yeah, and then we'd also like to give a huge thank you to all of the rest of you, the riffraff, who have not supported us financially, directly.
But are watching us, which is great too.
Yeah, who are hanging out with us for like half an hour on their own free time to sit and chat and then, type up comments, which are often really cool and interesting that we get to sort of respond to and have a back and forth, giving us a little bit of a sense of community. That's cool. You're doing a real fun thing. We appreciate
doing us a solid.
You know what's great? If you're watching like somebody with like 1 million subscribers, they don't know you. They don't know who you are. You're a number to them. Sometimes you're a number to us too. But if you comment, if you interact with us, we see it. And this is the Q&A for a reason. We actually are having a back and forth, so it is cool. Yeah. Your engagement has an outsized impact on our lives compared to somebody who has a relatively larger audience.
Absolutely true.
Yeah. So thank you so much for hanging out, interacting with us however you do. We appreciate you as well. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.